Hello, Dr. Zane here. I want to review briefly the articles that you have to read for week 3 here. The focus of this week is on functional assessments, specifically the indirect assessments. Also in this week, you'll see a list of different indirect assessment instruments that you'll be able to use. Again, you have to use 2 or more of these for your project. But the articles that we've selected for this week are really, really, really interesting. Again, they will bring you back in time to the actual development of these indirect methodologies. And just like in the first week when we read a series of articles that gave you the evolution of our thinking about the functions of behavior and functional analysis, the articles this week kind of take you back in time to review the people who did the early work in trying to figure out how to assess the function. You're going to read articles by the people who developed some of these questionnaires, and also a big piece of the readings this week will be a review of the reliability and validity of these instruments. You may know in your clinical practice and experience that for non-behaviorally trained personnel, like school teachers or special educators in the typical school district, mostly if any sort of functional assessment is done, it's going to be these indirect methods. And you need to know, and I think you do by now, that the indirect methods are a poor way of predicting the right hypothesis that explains a problem behavior. So although indirect methods are good, and as Dorsey says, although they're kind of problematic, we need to do them. I agree, we need to do indirect. We get a quick read on the possible function. But you must remember that you never develop a treatment plan based on the hypothesis determined by indirect methods alone. Never do that. Bad practice. At least use some direct methodology such as ABC data or scatter plot data. But indirect methods, although quick, convenient, they give you quick information, they should never be the sole basis of data on which you determine function. Okay? So this set of articles are really great. I think you'll find them very interesting because, you go back in time, man, and you learn about the way people were thinking back in the 80s and in the 90s, and they were trying to develop these methodologies. So the first, so you might want to get out the articles, pause the video, get out the articles so we can go through them a little bit. We're not going to spend a lot of time on each. I'm just going to give you a general sense of them, okay? So the first one was Wieser, Hansen, Chamberlain, and Thompson, Functional Taxonomy of Stereotypic and Self-Injurious Behavior. Basically, they had staff rate the likelihood of what the consequence was for 2 categories of behavior, self-injurious and self-stem or stereopity or stereotypic behaviors. Okay. Again, this is back in what? In what was the year? 85? 85, right. So early on, now the Iwata studies have come up, and then of course, in terms of functional analysis, but we're beginning to develop quicker ways of doing an assessment than the long duration over many days functional analysis. All right. So the participants were 60 residences from a large state hospital who exhibited stereotypic or self-injury. All right. And they developed an assessment instrument described by Carr, a 6-item short survey. And again, they were looking at to what extent does self-injury for each resident involve positive consequences in terms of attention or escape avoidance from demands. Okay, so that's what they reviewed for each resident. The respondents identified that for each respondent, and then they collated the results. All right. So the results were that there seemed to be stereopity and self-injury seems to be separate, what we call response classes or functional response classes. Okay, so let's see the review. To summarize the results, staff ratings indicated that only 7% of stereopathy was followed by staff attention. 38% led to escape, but then 32%, almost a third, was not associated with any other observable consequence. Okay. Now, these are respondent data. They're subjective. No reliability. But it does point out something that I think we all kind of agree, that stereopathy and self-injury can be separate functional response classes. So they don't look the same all the time, but either response from either category could be maintained by attention, escape, tangible, or automatic. It's the kind of some early data showing that we have to really analyze carefully each separate response, okay? And that depending upon the function, we have to identify different interventions, which is kind of new to us, or not new to us, right? So the next article was the Duran and Crimmins one, and this is the article in which they discussed the motivational assessment scale, which they just recently developed, okay? And so they'll give you some history of it, and excuse me. They also talk about the reliability of the MAS in terms of inter-rater reliability. So that was like a retest reliability, we call it. The same raters rated at one time and then 30 days later, okay? And so, again, it was developed, the MAS was developed as a method that might be more quick to implement in terms of the function, so we can get started on treatment earlier. And so this article will be of interest to you because it discusses the history of the MAS, how they developed the reliability measures of it, and exactly what the reliability was. So I think you'll enjoy that. It's the seminal original article about that. But then what's interesting is that's followed by the Zarconi, Rogers, Awada, Rourke, and Dorsey article on trying to replicate the strong reliability of the motivational assessment scale. Now they do it a little bit differently than Duran and Crimmins did, but it'll be an interesting article for you to read to get a sense of how we establish reliability. How strongly can we believe the results of these different methods, okay? And so here, there was more like an inter-rater reliability where the MAS was given to a teacher and a teacher aide, all right? The same sort of correlation analysis were repeated that Duran and Crimmins used, but they didn't really get as high results in reliability as did Duran and Crimmins. So it'll be interesting for you to read that. I think that all of these articles will make you a bit more knowledgeable about the level of believability of these instruments, and I think it will influence you to say, to advocate more strongly, if you need to advocate more strongly, the use of ABC and direct assessment methodologies, okay? Now what we have is the Sigafus, Kurz, Roberts, and Cousins article on the reliability of structured interviews for the assessment of challenging behavior. This was done in '93, and they mentioned in their abstract, while structured behavioral interviews are often used in the assessment of problem behaviors among persons with DD, again, they're recognizing that we use indirect method interviews. There are no data on the reliability of this assessment methodology. So Sigafus et al. Developed a study where they test the reliability of a 15-item interview protocol, okay, on focusing on behaviors, challenging behaviors displayed by persons with developmental disabilities. And they make the point, not surprisingly, that we should gather direct observation data to determine, to look for correspondence with the indirect methodology. It's more evidence for you to claim the need for the direct observation data and not to have colleagues rely just on the indirect methodology. We just have a poor prediction of function with the indirect methodologies. So this article will be of interest to you as well about how they gathered those data and the actual results that they obtained with it. Okay? So I think I'll stop here and go to part 2.